If God loves Israel, why did God allow the October 7th massacre to happen? Why would he allow that to happen if he loves Israel?
So kind of a problem of moral evil dilemma.
Yeah.
If God had the power to prevent fill in the blank, we'll say October 7th in this, but he didn't, did he permit it? In which case he's not all good because he caused evil.
Yeah.
Or is he not all powerful, in which case he's not God because he lacked the capacity to prevent these sort of evil things? Problem is this quote-unquote dilemma that was made popular by Antony Flew. It actually came from Epicurus, a Greek philosopher, which we'll get into in a moment. But the dilemma is you got one of two options, neither of which work out well for you. Therefore, the idea of God being all good and all powerful is a nonsensical one because the evil world that we see today shows that's impossible. The problem is, and this is oftentimes the case when you're dealing with atheists and people that would object to Christianity on these bases, they are letting their emotions set the terms for the dictionary rather than actually letting the Bible explain what God is like and who he really is. So if we let the God of the Bible stand on his own revelation of himself, do we see the kind of entity that only exists to treat us as pets, to make sure that we're always comfortable, that we're always happy, that his highest priority is this positive stimulation of our nerve endings? Is that the God of the Bible? Obviously not. You see in the first page of the Bible the idea that God was willing to allow the introduction of evil, but was immediately from the get-go starting a work of redemption, that he allowed us to make mistakes, but he was also going to be consistent with his nature and sought to justly redeem us, without forcing us, by the way. And that'll be important in a moment. Now, I mentioned that guy, Epihudawati. His name is Epicurus, and he was what we would call a hedonist. He believed that morality was determined on the basis of pleasure, that if something was good, it's because it feels good. The classic song, it can't be wrong because it feels so right. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not hurting anybody. That's that mindset of pleasure equals morality and pain equals immorality. So if we, and he himself was a Greek who had a certain affinity for Aphrodite, who was a goddess that was very much affiliated with pleasure. He was essentially a proto-atheist in terms of paganism because he looked at a universe that was run and created by these gods he believed were only interested in making us feel good, and their power was limited. So he thought, and this was what Epicureans really did, keep the gods at a distance because they don't really have the kind of influence that you want over your life, or pursue them so fully that you start to figure out that you are God yourself. And this was what resulted in the counterbalance of Stoicism, where they wanted to keep the gods at a distance because they'd rather make the decisions for themselves. Point being made is this. When you assume God's only purpose is for me to feel good, and it's his job to make sure it stays that way, then you see things that don't make me feel good and ask, where is God? Why isn't he upholding the end of the bargain I decided for him? When you say it like that, it sounds silly. And this is usually when the debate turns into emotional manipulation. They'll say, look at the people who were violently and viciously assaulted, not only in their genital regions, but parents that had to watch their children burned alive in ovens, that we have the blood still on baby carriers and all of these videos of them celebrating the massacre of the Hebrew people. If God loves the Hebrew people, then why is it that they are being subjected to so much evil? Now, you're looking at all that and your heart's broken just like mine is and just like God is. But here's the interesting part. What's the assumption? What's the mistake? God's purpose is to stop those things from happening. Why? Because I'm going to cross my arms, pout, and say, if you're going to do emotional manipulation, I can do it too. Pout and say, well, if he was real, then he wouldn't allow anything that I don't like and that you don't like either. Well, quite frankly, God doesn't care what you like or don't like. That's the harsh answer. But when it ultimately comes down to it, let's ask another question. when we see this world suffering and we know, or at least we believe, let's take that step back at least, we believe there is in existence an entity with the power to do and the knowledge to do the best possible thing in resolving this. Can we grant that? Yeah. Not just that he would be powerful enough, that's one part of the dilemma, good enough by nature, but know enough to how to deal with this most effectively. Is that fair? Well, then suddenly the trilemma becomes a tri-resolution. Because if he knows what evil to allow and what evil to prevent, let's just ask the question, why didn't God stop all the evil that he already stopped and since never happened? Well, he did stop it. That's why it never happened. And we can't make an argument from a vacuum because we don't know how much worse off we would get if God wasn't intervening. Mm-hmm. So the question is, why is those instances of evil, like October 7th, like bone cancer in children, like anything else that you're going to say in order to try to get some sort of emotional response and then justify belief and rejection of God? Well, here again is the problem. What has God done? He didn't separate himself from our pain, but voluntarily became a part of it. He suffered more than anyone else has in history, leaving heavenly glory and subjecting himself to the humiliation of human nature, was subjected to the rejection and abandonment by his friends after they swore they would go to their deaths to protect them. He was literally subjected to the most brutal form of execution and torture ever devised by human beings, bar none, and did so knowing at any moment he could stop it, and yet did so with you and me and all of our redemption in mind, that put together a system where he would be victimized and say, why does God victimize me? And that's what brings us back to that whole, why doesn't God judge the people I don't like that make me feel angry kind of issue? This is the problem. Your emotions are letting you literally dictate for God what he ought and ought not to do instead of what he has done and is currently doing. If we have an October 7th, which was horrible, why didn't we have an October 8th and 9th and 5th and 15th? You can't argue that in favor of God, but you can't hold it against him either. So what is the point? What is the clincher in all of this? Well, I know what caused October 7th. It was this book. The command to slaughter the unbelievers wherever you find them, that when you encounter the unbelievers, strike the necks, to strike terror into the hearts of the unbelievers, to subjugate the Christians and the Jews, because the Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah. Any Jew ever claimed that in history? On and on it goes. Men willing to literally rape, pillage, steal, and murder, and torture children for a lie, and a verifiable lie at that. Why? We don't have all the questions for that, or we don't have all the answers for that kind of question, rather. But if, on the other hand, you look at the other stat and go, why did God subject himself to a full Roman crucifixion? Why did God enter this world at all instead of letting us destroy ourselves like we wanted to? Mm-hmm. If you believe in a God that is all good, and you believe in a God that is all powerful, and you believe in a God that is all knowing, then you don't also get to say, I know more than God because my feelings are stronger than your ability to argue it. That just makes you self-manipulative at that point. But if, on the other hand, we work with what we actually have, if God knows what to allow and what to prevent, we have the opportunity to say, okay, A, he's going to be the judge for these monsters, and I hope redemption, because I'd hate to see that day even towards my worst enemy. Or he's going to be the justifier in the one who would not only take on himself what those jihadis deserved, but me as well, because I'm very easy and eager to undermine my emotional impact on other people. And that's the point. If we're going to say, who killed Jesus? Was it the Romans? Was it the Hebrews? Was it whatever? It was me. I'm the one who Jesus had to die for because he by nature is just that good. In due time, Christ died for the ungodly. When we were still sinners, Christ died for us, Romans 5 and verse 8 says. So if we're talking about this issue, Don't get caught up in the emotional stigma. Don't get caught up in the manipulation. Don't get caught up in the how dare you even make an excuse for this just to hold to your bigoted and archaic beliefs. They're going to throw names at you, whatever. The idea behind this is the assumption that God ought to treat us like pets, and that's not the God of the Bible. If they want to disprove the fake God that they made up, join them. But if you want to actually argue the God of the Bible, then show them chapter and verse what he did and what he is still doing. That's always my answer to these kinds of questions.
Yeah, and I would say that I would have them read the book of Deuteronomy, and especially towards the end of the book, you can read, 29, especially. Let me see, maybe 28 as well. Yeah, 28, 29. And there, God lets Israel know that, they will have consequences for their disobedience. And so when their children are born to them in later generations, and the children ask, hey, why is the land so desolate, and why are things such a mess? They'll say, hey, because we disobeyed God. And that's why so much calamity has happened to us,
Right.
is because of our own stubbornness. By the time the prophet Isaiah comes, if you read Isaiah chapter 30, you'll find that Isaiah says, hey, you got, Israel, you have received counsel not from God. You've gone astray from God, and you've moved away. And then you have, these wonderful parts in the prophets, like Jeremiah 33, where God comes in and says, hey, even though you've left me, I love you. And I'm gonna redeem you, and I'm gonna heal you, and I'm gonna bring you back to myself, and I'm gonna make a new covenant with you, and with your children, and it's, you're gonna see that it's I'm gonna win you back, and everything like that. In a sense, disobedience leads. There's consequences to disobedience, and Israel has fallen, in a sense, under, what Deuteronomy talks about, the blessings and the cursing.
Yeah.
And, but also you see that God is redeeming Israel. And you're going to see this all the way up to the end of the Bible, where there's going to be a calamity that happens to Israel. It's prophesied, read the book of Zechariah 12 through 14, and you can read about that. But God will come to their rescue. And so does God love Israel? Absolutely. But is there consequences to their disobedience?
Yeah.
Yes, there is that as well.
Right.
And so you see both those things in the Bible.
Right.